Welcome back. I forget where we left off. I think we were on dependency management. I think that's right. Essentially, what I want to do is I want to recreate the functionality of Dependabot that you'll see on GitHub. That way, if I have a project that's sitting out there, there's a job that runs on a schedule, and it will inspect my code repository, find any dependencies, check and make sure that they are or not up to date. And if they're not, it will automatically go into my project and make a pull request to update my dependencies. And then I can elect to auto merge them, which uh, I'm not I'm not that brave, so I won't do automatic merging. But then it'll present me with a pull request that I can either approve or close to automatically update my dependencies. So this one gets a bit more involved than the other components. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So we left off, we got get T actions working. So what we're going to do is create a user for Renovate. So go ahead as our administrator, user, site administration, identity and access user accounts. We're going to create one. We're going to call this Renovate bot. You can call it Renovate. I like Renovate bot. Sounds funny. And we'll just give it an email address of renovate@example.com. Give it a password. And okay. So there's two ways that Renovate can kind of function. Um, you know, what we can do is, we can have our Git installation over here, and this can work in one of two ways. This can work on a per repository or even a per user basis, or it can run as sort of like a centralized fashion. So the idea is that you can do this on push operations. You can do this on a schedule. We'll just talk about a schedule now for sake of argument. So when we have a push or on a schedule, what's going to happen is it's going to run a workflow that's going to invoke Renovate bot. Now, what Renovate bot's going to do is it's going to go back. Let's just say for the example, actually, this is a self. Oh, that's terrible. So say that this is I'm doing this on a per repository basis. Git will invoke an act job, which will invoke Renovate bot. Renovate bot will then it can clone down its source code, or it can inspect the repository, one or both. And what it will do is it will make a check against your repository, and we'll say inspect whatever. It's going to inspect your repository, and if it finds that it needs to make any uplifts, it will do so in a PR. And that will get reopened back on Git itself. And if you choose to merge, then your code base will be just up to date and your code base will be happy and you will hopefully not have very many vulnerabilities. And what we're going to end up doing is, in this example, is kind of the same thing, except that instead of a per repository basis, we're going to do this centralized. It's going to do the exact same thing here, except that it's going to inspect all repos. Don't ask me why I did that green. All repos. Now we're going to have a list of repos, but instead of inspecting just one repository itself, it's going to inspect and do this for all of our repositories that we ask it to. So actually, this is going to run as one central workflow, so I don't have to reduplicate this effort across the board. Now, if you're hosting a big installation, maybe you want people to do it on their own. So just know that there's a couple of methodologies that you can use for this. So because of that, what I'm going to do, going to sign out as that user. I'm going to sign in as Renovate bot. And I'm going to create a repository to house my core central configuration. That is really bright. There we go. So I'm going to call this just Renovate, create the repository. Now, in this repository, I'm going to have a centralized config that's sort of my core main settings. And then each repository, when it goes to inspect them, we can add a layered configuration that's that per repository specific config that we can tweak and tune how it behaves. So what we want to do here is go ahead and create this configuration file. I'm just going to call it config.js. Oops. And in that file, I'm going to put this. This is going to be my core config, platform, Git. This is the endpoint. So it's going to end up having, it's going to be kind of confusing. The act runner will then launch Renovate as a separate container. Renovate will communicate back with our Git installation to inspect the repositories, make decisions, open pull requests, open issues, and so on and so forth. So it needs to be able to talk back to Git. When it makes its either merges or pull requests, it needs to have an author, so we put that in there. That's the username, Renovate bot, auto discover, set to true. Some onboarding configs, we just provide a schema and extends the recommended config. Optimize for disabled, persist repo data, and repositories I have blank here because what I'll do is I'll actually fill this in later with the repositories that I want to onboard. That's the way I prefer to do it. I'll just onboard the specific repositories because I don't want it hitting everything. So that's all I really need to do. We'll commit these changes for now. That way we just get this done and out of the way. So what needs to happen is because Renovate is going to be running on as a separate Docker container, separate from Git, it needs to be able to communicate with the Git installation. And we provided the API endpoint that it's going to use to do different things, but we need to give it some access. So we're actually going to create an access token. So with my Renovate bot user, I'm going to go to settings. I'll go to applications, and I'm not going to do an OAuth application. I'm going to do a token here. So we're going to call this just Renovate bot token. And I'm going to set it for all public, private, and limited repositories. And then it's not really a huge deal to do public only because you're going to, each repository that we want it to do inspections on, we're going to make it collaborator, but we're going to give it all here. And it needs to have a few applications. One is read and write issue because it's going to create issues in the projects. We want to do read and write repository because it's going to open pull requests, and we just need it to do read user. We don't need write actions to user. And that's all we really need. So I'll generate the token. I'm going to copy this token and keep it for posterity. Hang on to that. Okay. Now, what's going to happen is inside this project, we're going to make a Git actions workflow. That's going to actually be our automation, and we're going to that's going to be our staging ground to do all this work. So while I'm here in actions, actually, I don't want to do a personal actions. I want to go to my Renovate repository, and it's at this scope, the repository scope, that I'm going to go to settings, actions, and we're going to create a secret. And we're going to make a new secret. We're going to call this secret Renovate token. And we'll paste that right there and save that. Now, this is an option. This next step is optional, but it really does work pretty well for it. You don't have to do this, but if you have a GitHub account and within your account, you create just a simple token, a pat token. It doesn't have to have really deep permissions, just some read permissions. If you create that and you add it here and then you reference it in your Renovate workflow, it gives the added benefit of downloading change logs from all your components that it's going to discover, and it makes it a lot more useful. So if you don't want to have a GitHub account, you don't have to do it. If you want the most out of Renovate, you should probably do this step. So you don't have to be bored with me logging into my GitHub and everything. I'll pause the video and I'll come right back. Okay, so I created a new token on my GitHub account. If you don't know where it is, you have an account on GitHub. You go to click on your icon for your user, go down to settings, then all the way at the bottom of the left-hand menu, it's like developer settings, and you want to go to classic tokens, and then you want to generate a new classic token. And only permissions you really need is just to public repo, which just lets it read public repositories. It's pretty innocuous. And create that token. And once you have that, we're going to go to add secret, and we're going to call this one token GitHub. Now, if you're wondering why this one starts with the word token on GitHub, Git disallows you creating secrets that start with the word GitHub. So, okay, so I pasted in my GitHub token, which I skipped over because y'all don't need to see that, and you can see it right here. So, if you forget what it is, you're gonna have to regenerate them because you can't re-access your secrets once you've created them. So, I've created both of these tokens now. And what we're going to do at this point, so we have all of our core components in place. If we go and we look, so I've got this main config.js for Renovate. I have the access tokens that I need. So for Renovate to access Git and also for it to access GitHub to pull down extra information. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to create a new file here. We're going to, same thing as the Git actions. We're going to put this in .git workflows, and we're going to call this renovate.yaml. And what I'm going to add in here is a workflow. I'll copy and paste it and go through it. So we're going to name this just Renovate. You can get more creative in your name. We can give this a cron schedule to run daily, or you can give it a very specific cron schedule. This actually may not even work. I think it does. I add workflow dispatch because that way I can test it. I can kick this off ad hoc. Jobs, we have the job which is called Renovate. It's going to run, that's my act runner. That's the label Ubuntu latest. It's going to pull from GitHub. This one here, I pinned the repository. Interestingly enough, what's going to end up happening is it will discover its own repository and it will see that you are using some actions. It may or may not recognize to upgrade this, but you can use latest. These things update quite a bit, so it's up to you. We're going to check out our own code because we need to access that config.js file, so we have to check out our code for it. And then we're going to run a job called Renovate. We're going to pass it 3 environment variables. One is the link to our config file, our Renovate token, which is a secret, and our GitHub token. Notice this actually is GitHub com token, but we call it token GitHub to get around the limitation. And I should be able to commit this change, and there it is. It did not kick off an action because I didn't tell it to use as a trigger. It's only on a cron schedule and a workflow dispatch. Because I had a workflow dispatch, I don't think I showed this before. If you actually click down here on your actual workflow, this is a feature that only came in like Git 1.23, so this is a pretty new feature. You can actually click run workflow. You can pick your branch, pick your tag, and you can check out the syntax yourself later. But the you can add variables that you can fill in, and then those variables can then be piped into your workflows. It's actually pretty handy. So I'm just going to tell it to run this workflow. Now, by default, the first thing that Renovate's going to do is it's going to make an onboarding PR. It's going to make a pull request against all of the repositories that you tell it to, its own repository being one of those. You can actually see it did the setup job. It's already checked out its own code base and it's running. And what we can see here is that it's actually using uh, its own repository to start. And it's not really going to do anything because it has to onboard itself first. So it really hasn't done much of anything, it looks like. But what you can see now, if I just go to code here, it hasn't created any issues yet, but it created a pull request, which is called configure renovate. And did it in its own branch too, if you actually want to see that. It makes a branch here. And this is what it's going to do. It just creates a really basic onboarding uh, per repository config file. Not much to it, and it'll actually clean up this branch later on. It'll see it as an orphaned branch, and it'll clean itself up. What we want to do is go in this pull request, and if we look at it here, it's got a lot of information about what it's trying to do. It just says it's onboarding. It helps you understand before it starts, and yada yada yada. It detected that we had it calls it GitHub Actions, but you get the idea. It discovered this, and based upon our default config presets, and by the way, there are tons of ways to tweak Intune to make this your own. So I recommend that you go to Renovate's website and you check out all the different configuration options. There's tons of them. But it says here, if you do this, it's going to start dependency updates. Once this onboarding PR is merged, it's going to create, it's called like a dashboard. It's actually going to create it as an issue, but it kind of lets you see what's going on and how to control different things. It just kind of tells you how it's going to behave. So because of this, with your current configuration, it's going to create a pull request, and we know it's going to do, branch name, so on and so forth. It's going to merge it into main, upgrade that. Actually, oh, looks like it's actually upgrading it for me. Interesting. It's going to upgrade my YAML file. I'm actually kind of interested. I'm going to check something out real quick. So if I check this file at this point here, this was 39169.3. Huh, interesting. What did it say it was going to do? Oh, after I onboard this, it's probably going to rerun and discover this in order to upgrade itself. So that's kind of cool. It's actually going to upgrade itself in my git actions. It's pretty neat. And if I had a bunch of like Python files, like requirements files, it would see that, hey, there's a new version of this, and then you can choose to upgrade it or not upgrade it or whatever you want to do. So down here, uh, I have some options, whatever. I'm just going to say create the merge commit and then commit it. I didn't actually delete the branch. I could have. I probably should have, but it's going to clean itself up on the next go around. So it's actually done what I asked it to do now. And you can see it's created this renovate file. Now, if I do a subsequent run on this, I could either rerun all jobs or just click here and then run the workflow. And you can see that was the last thing that I did. And you can customize like these names and all kinds of stuff that it does. What I want to look out for though, now it's actually going to step into, now that it's been onboarded into Renovate. You have to give it a sec. See here, it's created a branch, and you can see that's what it was going to do, is to upgrade the version of the container that I'm launching. And we're just going to give it some time to run here. I might pause while it's doing its thing. It's pulling this image down, I'm sure. Or maybe it's doing something, I'm not sure. Oh, it says it already did create the branch and the job is done. No, it's still running. Let's see. Well, it definitely created the branch, and we can actually see it's upgraded this right there. Let's see what it's doing here. Okay, so I don't know why it was hanging up or anything like that, but it looks like it's finished here. So we go back again here. We see there's been a pull request to update the Docker tag on this. You can see the package, quote unquote, uh, is this actions container. I can see the source code. This will actually take me out to GitHub to see the source of that. It shows it's a container. It's been a minor update and change. This is pretty cool. I mean, it does all of my updates for me, and I can choose on this one to, I can inspect it. Files change. I see what it expected it to do. Now the cool thing is I don't have to adopt this. I can just close this thing if I want to. And then if I rerun it again, it's not gonna try and keep redoing. It's gonna say, hey, if you want to retry it, it'll give you the option to later in my issues dashboard here. And it says actually, so you can come here and you can see what's outstanding. These updates have all been created already, and I can click a checkbox to force a retry if it seems like it failed, and you get the idea. So this is kind of your dashboard, and these are your actual functional pull requests. I'm going to go ahead and tell this one to go for it. And that's been merged in. And the next time that this would run, say on a schedule, we can see what it thinks it's doing. So you're actually gonna have to download a new version of it. So you can kind of see here that this is kind of it's a little wasteful on my resources. So we'll get into that a little bit later, where we can start caching containers and whatnot. So now let's see what it's doing here. It's basically diving in and it's inspecting everything, and it's pretty much done. And I don't think it's really done much of anything. So I go back here now. I can go back to my dependency dashboard, and it says there's no open branches. It's all up to date. So essentially, what I've done is I've gone through and I've I've had it upgrade itself. Now, the last thing I'll show you, I'll just make this real quick. Sign out. I'll go back in as my regular user. And I may have had this old test repo from a while back. I don't really have any dependencies to show in here, but just to show you how it kind of works, I'm going to copy the path to this repository. So, well, actually, what I need to do is, if I'm going to onboard Renovate to actually work on one of my repositories, the only thing I really need to do is go into settings, collaborators, and just add Renovate bot as a collaborator. That way it has write access. See, I don't want to make it administrator, doesn't need to do that, but write access is sufficient. And all I really need to do is go into Renovate here and config.js. I'll edit the file, and all I'm going to do is just add that repository right there. And I can start making a list. And this is kind of where I'll centrally control, from the Renovate perspective, go out and scan these repositories, please. And then from the repository owner perspective, all I have to do is just allow it to have that access to my repository. So the token I gave it, you gave it that kind of access, but you still have to give it access to the repository layer. So I'll go ahead and commit those changes. And just to show it in action real quick, run the workflow. And nothing really has changed in here. It's checked out its own code base to get to it. Now you can see it's looking at itself, but now it's looking at my repository over there. It's going to go through and it's going to create the onboarding PR and so on and so forth. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. So actually, I'm going to open an incognito window so I can go to there. I'll sign in as myself real quick. So imagine that I just have Renovate on a schedule at this point. I go into here. Actually, it did not create the pull request. Let me see why it did not do that. What did it do? What did it do? Oh, it has nothing to actually scan. That's funny. I guess if it has nothing to scan, it's not really going to bother onboarding anything. It's going to say, you got nothing for me to scan. Okay, fine. Let me Oh, let's see. What do I do here? Let me give it something to work on. Idea. Let's create a file. Add file, new file. We'll just make a requirements.txt. And I don't know what's a good requirement here. Okay, well, let's just put something basic here. So we'll do like the 6 package, greater than or equal to 19, just something like that. So now that I've committed some changes and added requirements, it should pick that up. So let's just rerun the job. It should set up and check out the code pretty fast. There we go. Let's see what it's going to do. Hopefully it'll actually do something on the repository this time. Okay, it's done its own cloning. There we go. Now we've actually got something here. We can see it went ahead and made an onboarding branch this time. So it found test repo. It's made the configuration branch because it knows that it actually found some pip requirements. So, come back over here. We see we made a pull request just to configure Renovate. That's fine. We'll go ahead and commit it. I didn't have any actions on this one, so that's fine. And now, rerunning this job again, we should see some new effects of it discovering that file now that it's been onboarded properly. And like I said, once it's created that renovate.json file, we can tweak and we can tune the behavior of Renovate against our repository. We could actually create it up front if we want to. We don't have to actually have it run and do the onboarding necessarily. So we've actually seen it do some of the stuff. I don't know. Let's see what it did. Here we go. It actually didn't do a new pull request, but now we have our dependency dashboard and we can see it's at least discovered our requirements. So anyways, now you see how this is functional, and we can just leave this thing to run on a daily schedule, and all of our repositories will essentially be checked and updated, and we can ingest the pull requests as we want, and it just keeps all of our dependencies up to date. I think I'm going to stop this here. We're getting close to 30 minutes. That's crazy. And at this point, you have a really functional development platform to work off of. We have code management, we have remote development with Coder, we have CI/CD with Actions, and now we have Renovate Bot, which can do a lot of our dependency automatic management. At this point, we're really kind of getting into the bells and whistles, but we'll keep on pushing ahead in the next one. I think we're going to start replicating like the GitHub gists functionality. That way we can have a place to put scratch notes and write write a lot of our notes down and procedures and documents and whatnot. So I'll see you in that one.